The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hello, my name is M.D. Lake. Welcome to a discussion with Dorothy Cannell and Joan Hess. Dorothy and Joan are two of America's most successful authors of what Joan Hess insists that we call comedic mystery fiction. In this program, we're going to concentrate on their life and times. In a succeeding program, we are going to talk a bit more about the art of the comedic mystery. And I'm going to ask our guests to start by telling us a little about their writing, their central characters, and the books they've written. So, Joan, why don't you start?
Oh, Dorothy, why don't you start?
We're so competitive.
Yes.
My series character is Ellie Haskell. She appeared first in The Thin Woman. I've also written about Hyacinth and Primrose Tramwell, who appeared in Down the Garden Path. And Joan, why don't you take over?
I do two series. I do the Claire Malloy series. Claire is a bookseller in a small college town. I happen to live in a small college town. And then I do a second series in Magotty, Arkansas, which is a scuzzy little town in the Ozark Mountains with 755 people. It's amazing. I kill so many of them. The population does stay steady. And the character there is Arlie Hanks, who's the chief of police, because she's the only person who applied for the job.
Well, the population stays the same because you usually bring in somebody from outside that is going to get killed, don't you?
Well, I slaughtered a bunch of them in the first few books, and then I had to bring in some fresh blood, I suppose.
Well, between you, you've written something like 30 mysteries, and you've also written short stories, quite a lot of short stories, too. What I would like to know is what gave you the idea to write a mystery in the first place? What made you think you could do it?
I am a mystery writer because I have absolutely no marketable skills. If I could do anything else, because being a lazy person, I would probably ideally choose to do nothing, but writing is a lot easier for me than going out to work and having to work 9 to 5. I have only written 6 books as compared to Joan's 23.
30 minus
30.
6, I guess that's 24.
But when my youngest son was 6, he said to me, "Mommy, what are you going to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Sweetheart, I am grown up." And he said, "No, you're not, because you don't have a job." And that sent me racing off to the local community college to take a library degree, to work towards a library degree. I started with card catalog. My husband said, anybody can get an A if they take one class at a time. It became very clear that I was not going to get an A, I was not going to get a B, C, or a D, I was going to get an F. So
in card catalog.
In card catalog, and I would leave
The Dewey
home.
Decimal System is a mystery to her.
I would drive around my hometown every Wednesday night when I was supposed to be in class, afraid to get out of the car because no one must see me and report back to the family. After that, I took an English class, and I was elated when the professor said to me, "Dorothy, you should be a writer." And I thought, this is it. I can stay home all day. I can write. I spoke to my husband and said, "I'm going to be a writer." And he said, "Are you going to write the great American novel?" And I said, "No, I'm going to write the great British novel." He bought me a $50 manual typewriter. I never learned to change the ribbons, and I think that may have been part of the reason I did not sell anything for 7 years. But I started out very optimistically, and my husband was delighted that I took this new avenue of escapism, because I had been very involved in arts and crafts, and I had been into macrame in a major way.
You know, when I first heard that you had been in macrame, I was really quite shocked, and I really started to lose a great deal of respect for you.
Many people have. Many people have lost respect for me. Macrame
is basically that stuff that looks like free-form fish nets with all kinds of strange objects that you've woven into it. Is that what we're talking about here?
We're talking about this. I took a class in this.
Yes.
And most of my friends took cups or bottles and macrameed exquisitely around the bottle, and they would give these away as bud vases or candle holders. But I always thought big, and I decided to do a wall hanging for my son's room, and the macrame began to grow. And part of the problem was I was using extremely thick yarn. A sailor could have climbed up the rigging of this wall hanging, and eventually the macrame took on a life of its own.
Do you recommend macrame as a way of starting out if you want to become a very successful mystery writer?
Definitely, definitely. Macrame leads one on the path to murder, because my husband came very close to murdering me when the macrame took over the house and sent out these fibrous feelers and began to weave its way from room to room. And eventually he said to me, "Can we lock it in the basement?" And the macrame went reluctantly into the basement, but
Protesting
fibrously all the way. But the good news was that fortunately one night our house was struck by lightning, burnt to the ground at 3 a.m. And my husband was standing out on the lawn saying to neighbors and well-wishers, "Did you bring the weenies? Did you bring the marshmallows?" And then he turned to me and said poignantly, "Do you think the macrame is dead?"
This is a true story.
This is a true story,
Yeah.
yes.
Your house
yes,
burned down
yes, our
with
house
the
burned down.
macrame.
Yes,
Fortunately,
yes, and
her
it was
house was struck by lightning.
And your husband was elated.
Elated, of course he was elated. But there was always that fear that the macrame might have escaped. And we eventually were forced to move because we would hear these ominous rustlings in the middle of the night. So you can understand that my husband was very, very pleased that my new occupation only required a typewriter and paper. And I used that erasable bond because I'm a lousy typist and a rotten speller, and I thought it would be easy to deal with. But every time I breathed on the paper, the words flew off. Another reason why I did not sell anything for 7 years. I do not have a good work ethic either.
No, I can see that.
Yes, you can see that.
Yes. But
Yes.
do you think that this being struck by lightning was something, a sign from on high
It
that
was
you
a
should
sign,
be writing?
yes. It was definitely a sign, because as I stood out there on the lawn, in a
Listening to the
capacious
macrame
tent
yelping
gown,
as it burned.
about to be put on television, and there's nothing worse than getting up at 3 a.m. and realizing you're going to be on television in 2 hours. I decided that I had to get serious about writing, because I became very, very worried about a book I had written, my first manuscript, that was inside the house in a tin box. This is how deeply I valued this manuscript. And I thought, if that is burnt, I can never, never write it again. That is true. I don't think I could ever write that badly again. I rescued it, and I did rewrite it completely.
And that became?
That became Down the Garden Path. Originally it was a Regency romance. It later became a comedic mystery.
Okay, but you came to this country from England, and what was your reading background in the mystery before writing some of your own? Had you read any mysteries before?
I'd read a lot of mysteries. I had read a lot of everything. I was a very strange child because I had a father who was an avid reader. And he got me hooked on books at a very early age. So I was reading the Brontes and Dickens and Jane Austen at an extremely young age. I think I was 9 when I read Wuthering Heights, and at 10 I'd read all Dickens books. Therefore, I was a very nerdy child, which led me towards having an imaginative life, because I didn't have real friends, I had to have pretend friends. Sad, isn't it?
Terribly sad.
Yes, I told this sad story, and I
I
hope
moved.
it moves people to buy my book, but that is the truth. I live very much in the world of the imagination. And I think I was in my teens when I really began reading mysteries. My first mystery was Murder at the Vicarage. And I have loved Agatha Christie ever since. I love Dorothy Sayers. I think one of the best gifts my parents gave me was giving me the name Dorothy, because...
Did they give you that name because of Dorothy Sayers or not?
It may have been.
It may have been, yeah.
I don't
Your-
believe that.
I made it up because
know
it
you made
sounded
it up.
cute.
It did, and I led into it, didn't I? I gave you that opportunity.
Yes.
How about you? Whatever made you think that you could write a mystery, and why?
Well, I have a bachelor's degree in art, which qualified me to do absolutely nothing whatsoever. I majored in art because the art department had the best parties. I subsequently got a master's in early childhood education and ended up teaching art in a preschool, which was about my level of talent. With glitter and glue and construction paper, I'm very good. So I was doing this. A friend of mine came into town, plunked herself on the floor and said, we have to write romance novels. Excuse me. To which I said, huh? I had never read a romance novel in my life. This was 12 years ago, early 80s. The market was very, very hot. And they were begging for manuscripts. You did not have to have an agent. You just sent it into Harlequin, and they sent back a great deal of money. And I had never written anything that wasn't due on Monday. But I decided this might be kind of entertaining, so I convinced my mother, my saintly mother, to go down to the library and check out romance novels because I would not be caught dead checking them out. She picked up 4 white cover Harlequins, went to the desk at the library, panicked, and said, "But these are for my daughter," at the top of her lungs. I read 1.5 of them, thought, okay, I get it. Dawn meets Derek. Although they are drawn together incredibly, they're both beautiful, beautiful, attractive, intelligent people. Lusting after each other, they are kept apart by something, and then they get together. I boiled it all down to alternating T and T, F and F.
Which you're going to explain.
If I don't, it sounds dreadfully dirty, doesn't it?
Yes.
Touch and tingle, his arm brushed against hers, sending flickers of electricity.
Tremulous desire.
Tremulous desire.
To her innermost being.
And then the next scene would have to be an F and F, which is flash and flicker.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we kept touching and tingling, obviously we would topple into bed. So we had to flash and flicker, and she storms out of the room. You know, "I'll never speak to you again, you arrogant person." So I wrote 3 chapters of The Scarlet Sand, sent it to Harlequin, and went out to the mailbox to wait for a check. The check did not come in the mail, but I got back a very encouraging letter saying, "There is not sufficient editorial enthusiasm." This phrase perhaps is burned on my soul. But if I had anything else, I'd be happy to see it. So I took this well, in a mature fashion, ran into a friend at a party, and we decided to collaborate. She was doing cookbooks, and what did American women want but sex and recipes? A little arrogant, perhaps, on our part. So we came up with a thing that was ultimately called Recipes for Romance. They were short stories in which Dawn and Derek found each other again or discovered it was all a misunderstanding, ate, and went to bed.
Well, give us that wonderful phrase.
I wrote this line, I really did. Dawn gently sautéed the chicken breast in 2 tablespoons of clarified butter as she gazed lovingly across the candlelit kitchen.
That would get me, certainly.
Well, this is where it all gets very ugly. This one sold. And no, you can't find it, and we're not going to discuss it anymore. It's long gone.
But it is out there somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yes, hidden in
You're
some
lying
basement.
to us now, aren't
I'm
you?
sure every copy disintegrated. And if you find one...
No, it's met up with the macrame.
The macrame is
I
there.
hope they're both too... If they're spawning, we're in real trouble. No, if you do stumble across a copy, do call me. A large man named Guido will be by to pick it up. 10... But I thought, okay, this writing business isn't that hard after all. 10 manuscripts later, it was beginning to occur to me that I perhaps did not have a handle on this genre. All the rejection letters said, too much plot, not enough romance. Having no idea what they meant by romance, I would just go back in and smut it up to the point where by the 10th manuscript, I was writing porno. Very good porno, I might add.
But still.
And not selling. At this point, I decided to do what adults do in a moment of crisis, which is go back and get another degree. Got on the telephone with the University of Arkansas, and lo and behold, it was just come on down. We'll get you special admission in the PhD program, no problem. You can start in January. And this all went too fast. I called my agent and said, help me, help me. She said, write a mystery. I said, I cannot possibly write a mystery. Those are real books. But then at that point, I decided, okay, I will try it for the spring and summer, and if I have not sold in the fall, I will go to the university. So I wrote Strangle Prose, killed off a successful romance writer with much glee, was going to barbecue her little dog, but they wouldn't let me.
No, they're very bad about pets, aren't they? Allow you to murder pets. You can murder any kind of human being.
Adult
human being. But you can't murder a pet, especially a cat.
If you want to sell to Mystery Guild, you cannot murder a puppy, a kitty, or a baby. But you can murder hundreds of other people, but...
I recall you telling me once that you wanted to terrify your agent, and you came up with a plot that did involve a cat, an initial cat. Weren't you going to have the novel starting out with your heroine running over a cat in her car? Maybe
That must have been Carolyn Hart.
No, that was you.
You
That
must
was
have
you.
blocked it out.
You blocked that out. I think just your agent's reaction. Well, you were talking about your agent. You already had an agent, even though you didn't have any books, and you were even thinking of going back to school and giving up your writing career.
This was my third agent at this point.
How'd you get 3 agents before you'd ever sold a book? I mean, I think a lot of people especially people who want to write, wonder how you go about getting an agent.
Well, again, this is back when the romance market was thriving. And this friend had a friend who had an agent, and I just wrote a letter and said, you know, here's a chapter of The Scarlet Sand. Do you want to represent me? And she did, and we got nowhere with that. She was the agent for Recipes for Romance. And somewhere along the line with all these rejections, she suggested I try somebody else. And she recommended an agent in New York, and that relationship lasted about 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. I'd sent a chapter and say, you know, so-and-so recommended that I write you. Didn't hear anything, called, her phone had been disconnected, so that was, she eventually got in touch with me, but she said, I was having dental surgery and I've been out of the office for 6 weeks. I thought, no, this is not a relationship born in heaven. Then my third agent was representing a friend of mine, and I wrote her a very psychotic little letter saying, well, I don't know if you want to represent me or not, but if you don't think my stuff is funny, just forget it. Say it right now, right up front. Just say, if you don't think it's, if you don't think it's funny, just say, Joan, it's not funny, and I don't want to represent you, but don't toy with my affections. I don't know why on earth this woman represented me. She's the one that sold about the first 12 books.
My relationship with my agent was made in heaven. I found her name in the writer's market. We've been together for 10 years. It's working beautifully. I can't imagine being with anyone else. I think she's superb.
Incredible. Yeah.
Well, I've since moved on. I'm on my 5th agent now.
Right. Now you said you've gotten quite a few rejections, but you had written things before you wrote the Ellie Haskell and Ben series. So
wrote a lot of short stories, a great many short stories. My first attempt was Down the Garden Path as a Regency romance, as I have already said. When that did not sell immediately, as I felt it should have done, I started writing short stories. I attended a writer's workshop where we met every 3 weeks. I found that very useful because it gave me a deadline. And I would send out a short story and it would come back. And I would tend to ask family and friends to read the stories, and if I didn't get a glowing response, I became dejected and put the story away. So I would advocate to people, maybe find one person to show something to, somebody you trust, but don't pass these around like hamburgers to people for taste testing. So after I'd been writing for 7 years, I decided to get serious, and I'd start sending everything out. Now, getting serious did not mean
7 years before you, without being accepted. 7 years of rejection.
Yes, 7 years. 7 lean years, not 7 years of
and
planting.
you didn't fall back on macrame or anything of this sort.
No.
No lapses.
There was no lapses.
No, there was a toll painting lapse, a brief toll painting lapse. But that was primarily. Oh, and I started painting furniture. It did get to the point where my husband was hiding the furniture because we had flowers on it. No, I would have these emotional lapses, but I kept doggedly on. Mm-hmm. And after I had written for 7 years, it so happened that my oldest son was in high school. And having 4 children, I felt it behooved me to either sell something or get a real job. So I started sending everything out, and I kept a little log, a notebook of where I would send something. Before I sent out a piece, I would pick maybe 10 places that I could send it to, so that when that short story returned, as inevitably it would, these were like little homing pigeons, I could say, oh, wonderful. And instead of being devastated that this package was on the doorstep, I'd think, you're back, now I can send you somewhere else. And I'd go down and think, okay, we'll send you to Fantasy World, because I did not know I was writing mysteries at this time. I wasn't sure, so I would just look up in the writer's market and see what looked appropriate for the story. And I'd send that one off, and 2 days later another one would come back, so there was always mail. It really became very, very heartwarming to see these pieces. And so I dealt with rejection in a very upbeat manner.
I'll say.
And sometimes I would get a rejection that was not a form letter, not the standard, this does not meet our needs at this time. And one day I got a rejection from Mike Shane Mystery Magazine. And the man who wrote it was a man, Charles Fritsch. I do not know him, but I have to say, if he should hear this, thank you, because he gave me the most wonderful rejection. He wrote, "Dorothy, you're a lousy typist and a rotten speller, but you can write." And I was absolutely euphoric. I phoned my husband at the office. He was in a meeting. He was called out from the meeting. I said, "Julian, you will not believe this." You see, I did read romance novels, which is why I married a man by the name of Julian. Yes. Mm-hmm. And he said, "That's fantastic. This is wonderful. I'll bring home champagne." So rejections became a part of my life. Eventually, it became a surprise. It was sort of...
Must have been devastating when you finally got accepted.
Exactly. It was like the time.
The game is over.
The time I wasn't nominated for the Edgar. I was totally devastated. This was on a year when I hadn't written a book. Therefore, I had nothing to be eligible for.
Would you like to explain that a little bit? You were nominated for an Edgar in a year when...
No, I was not nominated. I have
you were
never
not
have,
nominated. Oh, okay.
and
So,
I'm sure never will be.
No.
But on this particular year, when I heard who had been, I felt this dreadful pang of regret and think, this isn't fair, why not me? And then eventually it sunk in that I had not written a book.
Yeah, we may get around to the heartbreak of writing what Joan calls comedic mysteries in a succeeding segment of this program. But that is a heartwarming story, and I think an inspiration to a lot of people who have received rejection slips. That it's all in how you look at it, I suppose, isn't it?
Well, and they make wonderful wallpaper.
Mm-hmm. That's what you've papered a bathroom,
Yes.
I think, with it, haven't you? Did you get a lot of rejection slips?
I didn't get too many the formal ones. The first one I got just broke my heart. You know, this does not meet our needs at this time. I mean, it could have said, "Take this manuscript in the yard, bury it, do not expect grass to grow for 7 years," and I wouldn't have felt any worse. Most of them were letters saying, "Good dialogue, good characters, too much plot, not enough romance." So I think actually my writing was very adequate. It was that I had no idea what I was writing and absolutely refused to read the genre because I had already figured it all out.
You never read mysteries before you wrote them?
Mysteries now.
No, mysteries you did, but not the...
No, I've read mysteries since Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew, and then on to Sherlock Holmes, and then on to Agatha Christie, and I was lost after that forever to the genre.
But you just never read romance novels and just picked it up from that one little glance in the books.
And had gone to romance writers' conferences where they said, "You absolutely positively have to love the genre to write in it," and I thought, no, I'm the one exception to that.
Yeah. What did you hope it would be like to be a published mystery author when you were waiting to get that first acceptance? What did you think? Did sort of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir would play "Nearer, My God, to Thee," and the portals would open, and is that in fact what has happened for you?
Well, I certainly thought they would publish 50,000, that I would be on the New York Times bestseller list because it was a hardback book. Good Morning America would be competing with the Today Show to get me on, and I would be fabulously wealthy.
And
this is, of course, what happened.
Of course, and for you?
For me, I expected to be paid a vast sum of money. I expected to become a household name immediately. But I think more than anything, I wanted to go into a bookstore, a regular hometown bookstore, and see me on the shelf. That, to me, is the ultimate moment.
And how was it when you did?
It was tremendously exciting because I knew the book was out. I'd been sent a copy, but I did not know it was in the stores. And to walk in and see it while I'm browsing, looking for something else, was probably one of the finer moments of my existence.
I was moved to tears when I found myself at the library in the card catalog.
Thank you for returning me to a dark moment of my life.
Uh-oh. Not even the local library?
No, I've never looked in the card. I shall never darken the area around the card catalogue again.
Why is that?
Because I flunked card catalogue.
Okay. Of course.
I thought you were implying they didn't buy your book.
Yeah.
No.
So you don't even look books up anymore?
No.
Possibly she doesn't know whether she's in the card catalog.
I have somebody else look them up for me. No, I
see.
cannot bring myself to.
Right. Could you tell us a little bit about something that came as a complete surprise to me, and that is the mystery convention. Now, I had no idea that such things existed in my life, and to come into the mystery field and discover that there were such things. Just tell us what mystery conventions are out there and why you go to them.
I had never heard of mystery conventions until after I'd sold my first book, The Thin Woman. And I met Barbara Mertz, who writes under the names of Barbara Michaels and Elizabeth Peters, and she said to me, "Are you coming to BoucherCon?" I did not know that this is the worldwide mystery convention.
Named after Anthony Boucher,
yes.
who was an author and critic, sort of tried to make mysteries respectable. Yes.
So that was the first one I went to, and then I began going to Malice Domestic, which is a convention geared to the traditional mystery, otherwise known as the cozy. And what is wonderful is that this is a place for writers, we call them pre-published writers, such as I was for 7 years. Booksellers, editors, agents. I know of several people who have gone to these conventions and have met an agent or an editor, and their career has been launched.
Well, I was very surprised. I had not heard of the BoucherCons either, and it was suggested that I go. I was absolutely terrified. And as you had said earlier, that I would perhaps spend the entire convention standing in a corner with a glass in my hand. But everybody was terribly, terribly friendly. The writing community is very supportive and very warm and open. I've only met 2 people, mystery writers, that I would gladly take out with a 2x4. And I suppose it's not polite to name names, is it?
No, I don't think we should do that.
But everybody else has been really great. We help each other. Call each other in the middle of the morning and say, I'm stuck in this plot. Whatever can I do? And sit and talk about it until you finally say, okay, now I know where they went. I will get back to work. That sort of thing. I was quite surprised by the community.
We're sort of one of the great pluses in the great surprises. I think that we're going to have to wrap this segment of our show up now. We've been talking to Dorothy Cannell and Joan Hess, 2 writers of comedic mystery, as Joan insists on calling it, and I hope she pronounces it correct, has taught me to pronounce it correctly too, comedic mysteries. Thank you very much for being on our show today.
Thank you.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.